Real encounters. When nightmares become reality, it was supposed to be just another ordinary night. Laura had settled into a cozy apartment after a long day at work, making her usual cup of tea and sitting down to watch a few episodes of her favorite show. The faint hum of the city outside her window was almost comforting, the usual sounds of traffic and distant chatter from passers-by, creating a sense of normalcy. But something felt off that evening. Maybe it was the heavy storm clouds that rolled in, blocking the moonlight, or the eerie stillness that hung in the air. She couldn't shake the nagging sensation that something wasn't quite right. As the evening wore on, the feeling grew stronger, almost oppressive. And soon, Laura would realize that her worst nightmare was about to come true. It began with a dream, the kind of dream that clung to the edges of your mind like a sticky fog, refusing to let go even when you woke up. In the dream, Laura was standing in her apartment, the same apartment she was in now. But everything was distorted, unfamiliar. The walls seemed to stretch and contort, and the windows were covered in a thick fog, making it impossible to see outside. A shadow moved in the corner of the room, darting out of her line of sight the moment she looked. She turned to the door, but it was locked. The air grew colder, and she could feel something behind her, breathing down her neck. Panic bubbled up inside her chest, and as she spun around, she saw a figure standing in the doorway, tall, dark, and looming. It had no face, just a dark void where its features should have been. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, the figure lunged forward, its hands outstretched toward her. Laura jolted awake, her heart racing, sweat clinging to her skin. She gasped for breath. Her mind scrambled as she tried to shake off the terrifying feeling that the nightmare wasn't. Over that something was still there, in the room with her. Trying to calm herself, Laura pushed the thought aside. It was just a dream, she told herself. Nothing more. But as the night wore on, strange things began to happen. She went to the kitchen to make another cup of tea, the kettle's whistle cutting through the silence. When she returned to her living room, she froze. The chair she had been sitting in earlier was now positioned slightly to the left, as if someone had moved it while she was gone. She frowned, convinced she had simply forgotten where she left it, but the unease in her stomach grew. Then came the sounds. At first, it was just a low, almost imperceptible scratching noise coming from the walls. Laura thought it might be rats or the apartment settling, but it sounded too rhythmic, too deliberate. Every few seconds, a sharp scratch would cut through the silence, as if something was trying to break through from the other side. She walked over to the wall, pressing her ear against it, but the sound stopped. Just like that. Just like that. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and a cold draft swept through the apartment. Despite all the windows being shut tight, Laura shivered, her breath visible in the sudden chill. The nightmare had already begun to bleed into her waking life, and she couldn't ignore it anymore. Then came the worst part. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, Laura found herself standing in front of her bedroom mirror, brushing her hair. She had tried to shake the uneasy feeling, tried to convince herself that it was all in her head. But when she looked up from the mirror, she saw an ether figure. It was standing behind her, in the reflection. Her heart skipped a beat. There was no mistaking it. This was the same shadowy figure from her dream. Tall, dark, and faceless. It stood motionless, just a few inches behind her. Yet she couldn't bring herself to move. Without thinking, Laura whipped around, but there was nothing there. The room was empty. Her pulse pounded in her ears, and her hands trembled as she backed away from the mirror. That's when the scratching started again, this time from within the mirror itself. The glass began to fog over as someone scratched at the other side, trying to break through. Laura screamed, stumbling backward into the corner of the room. The scratching grew louder, more frantic, and then the figure appeared again in the reflection. But this time it wasn't standing still. It was moving toward her, its hands now pressing against the mirror, its fingers curling with unnatural force. Terrified, Laura bolted from the room, slamming the door shut behind her. She ran down the hallway to her front door, only to find that it was locked from the inside. The key rattled in the lock, but it wouldn't budge. The apartment had become a prison. In that moment, Laura realized the horrifying truth. The nightmare wasn't just a dream. The figure in her dreams had followed her back into reality. The apartment, once a safe haven, had become the nightmare itself. The scratching, the cold, the strange sounds, they were all part of it. It had been waiting for her. With nowhere else to go, she made a final, desperate attempt to escape. She ran into the living room and grabbed her phone, dialing for help. But before she could hit send, the lights went out entirely. The room was plunged into darkness. And then, the figure was there again. But this time, it wasn't in the mirror. It was standing right in front of her, its faceless gaze locked onto hers. Its cold, empty hands reached out, and Laura could do nothing but scream. When the police arrived the next morning, they found the apartment exactly as Laura had left it. No sign of struggle, no forced entry, no signs of anyone having been there except for Laura's phone, lying on the floor. The screen cracked. Laura was never found. Some say she was taken by the figure in the darkness, that the nightmare she had encountered became her reality. Others say her spirit still haunts that apartment, forever trapped in the same place where her worst fears came to life. But one thing is certain. Nightmares can be real, and sometimes they follow you into the waking world. They end.